Let's get a look now at the economy, the recovery. With me for his thoughts and analysis is Warren Hogan, former ANZ chief economist, now industry professor at UTS, the University of Technology in Sydney. First of all, your overarching view, Warren, on how is the economy looking after the lockdown in Victoria and what is now, touch wood, a promising health outlook, Warren?
Yeah, good afternoon, Kieran. Look, the view on the economy shifted quite a lot in the last month. We've had some great news on a number of fronts, not just the health and the vaccine front has been really critical. But we've also had some great news on the labour market here and employment. Victoria is bouncing out of its lockdown, and we're getting evidence of that with people getting jobs back. But the rest of Australia is continuing to improve, and the ABS figures for October showed employment levels in the rest of the country outside of Victoria were only 1% below where they were pre-COVID, and that's despite October being the first month of the wind down of JobKeeper. So I don't think any economist sort of 3 or 4 months ago was expecting such a good outcome. And then we've got these confidence measures for both business and consumers, which are rising pretty solidly. In the case of consumers, got the housing market moving. So this economy is really building momentum into the end of the year and into 2021, and I think it's outperforming just about all expectations and, well, in line with the government's very rosy view from their early October budget.
Yeah, and you look at the market, it's absolutely flying off the back of the vaccine news. It shows you just how fundamental that health story is.
Yeah, well, the health story is critical. It's critical to the equity markets, sentiment there. It's critical to the property market through consumer confidence, and it's critical to spending. So this is the unique feature of this downturn, is how important the health news has been. And look, you know, we have got a vaccine and it's on its way, but it could well be another 6 to 9 months. And you look what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere. They've got one very difficult winter ahead of them in much of Europe and America. And we're not out of the woods yet on that front. So, you know, yes, the story is really improving and the economy is looking better by the minute. But, you know, we are vulnerable still, and we've got to stay on top of this health issue.
We do indeed. So what have you made of some of the policy responses? Not just federally, but at the state level. We saw Dominic Perrottet with a reforming budget in New South Wales, now a big spending budget and investing budget out of Victoria yesterday.
Yeah, and it was quite a contrast. I mean, all of these government budgets, the federal, state level, are all about putting money into the economy. All these senior politicians are really operating in an environment none have ever seen before, a blank cheque, if you will. But there are different approaches emerging, and some of that's the difference between the state responsibilities and the federal responsibilities, and some of it's along party/ideological lines. Certainly in New South Wales, there was a strong element of reform in there and some really bold stuff. There was investment and there was stimulus, whereas in Victoria, again, a very big budget deficit, a lot of government spending, expansion of government, and yes, investment in both economic and social infrastructure, a little bit less economic reform. Yeah, the issue for this, especially as the economy is improving and we're going to put this health issue behind us next year, is sustainability of government finances. And the feds have done a huge job and they should continue to. The state's got to be careful, though, that they don't put themselves on an unsustainable path. Victoria and Queensland seem to be more risk of that than New South Wales at the moment.
And if we look now at the superannuation debate, I know you responded to some comments made by the former Prime Minister Paul Keating the other night. Basically, your argument is that it's a very different savings environment that we're in today than when compulsory super was first put in place, Warren. Explain to our viewers your thinking on that and whether there should be an increase in the super guarantee.
Yeah, well, a lot of the economic thinking in the 1980s, which is when super was sort of dreamt up, was coloured by the fact that Australia was thought to have a deficit of savings and we needed to bolster savings. Well, the rest of the world has seen their savings shift, lots of savings as populations age in Japan and Europe, and now we're in that boat too here. And so the problem with our economy right now is we probably, you could characterise it as having too much savings and not enough consumption or investment. And I think to go and increase the amount of forced savings in the economy could be counterproductive to that sort of cyclical position the economy is in right now. So that is the argument for why you delay the super guarantee increases, not necessarily to cancel them, but to delay them. Another way to think about it is increasing super right now is going to potentially reduce wages or wage growth, because we know that some of that increased cost is borne by the worker, and it's going to make people more expensive to hire because there is an increased cost for the business as well. And we're actually trying to do the opposite right now, as you know, in terms of government policy. We're trying to keep people's wages growing while cheapening labour up. People need money to spend to support the economy, and businesses need to make sure, we need to make sure labour doesn't get too expensive so businesses hire people and get jobs back on track. So right now, the super situation, I don't think the move right now would be the ill-advised and would sort of make our economic challenges more difficult.
And as we are near the end of 2020, a year that many of us, none of us will ever forget, that's for sure. How do we look into 2021, barring any great shock like we've seen this year? Are you feeling a bit optimistic given where we are in terms of the vaccine developments and international, a bit of stability via the White House and so on? What's your overall view as we near 2021?
Yeah, I feel a lot more optimistic about next year. The most optimism I've felt since the start of this. We still have many of the challenges that we had pre-COVID. That is very sort of soft underlying rates of growth in many countries around the world, including Australia's. Low inflation, low wage growth, very slow increases in standards of living. These are all issues out there. We still have the challenges around trade, which hopefully Joe Biden as president will take a different approach to Donald Trump. But putting those sort of background pieces, those issues to the side, the fact is this economy in Australia has bounced out of this far better than anyone could have predicted 3 or 4 months ago. We're taking growing optimism from the consumer. And if we can maintain that momentum right through to the end of the JobKeeper program in March, then we may be able to really get that hoped-for private sector economic recovery going, with businesses investing and hiring and getting unemployment rate down again. So I think there is a pathway to some really strong economic outcomes now that's quite realistic.
Good stuff. Nice to end on that note. We'll talk to you soon, Warren. Appreciate it. Warren Hogan there from UTS.